Hello, YouTube. This is Neo981 bringing you my Deadliest Warrior, her review slash top 10 Deadliest Warrior episodes. Video. Now, in the last video, I said I was going to explain some things about Spike TV's Deadliest Warrior. And, well, here we go. Deadliest Warrior is a show where experts on warfare, fighting styles, and even in certain weaponry and armor, of some of history's greatest and most infamous warriors and warrior class. This is from the ancient to, well, now. Deadliest Warrior has covered nearly every form of fighting and style and every type of warrior. Basically, the show is like this. Each team, each episode, there's a certain fighter or class. It's based on their history, their fighting styles, their weaknesses and strengths, and especially their weaponry and armor. They are put through a fight simulator 1,000 times and to determine a winner, so that each fight doesn't end with a lucky blow. Now, for the list, I'll be doing things a little bit more differently than I usually do in videos. 1. I'm going to explain in the background behind each of the fighters or fighter within the list. Number 2, I am going to be talking about their weaponry and armor. Number 3, it's going to contain some spoilers if you haven't seen the show. Then again, and if any of us out there have actually seen it, we kind of know the result. And number 4, there is going to be one entry in this list I'm going to get a lot of criticism on, and because of the result. And to those who want to complain about this particular entry, it's my list, my channel, my rules. So without further ado, let's get on with the video, shall we? Number 10. Episode 4, Pirate vs. Knight. Now, this episode of Season 1 and brought us one of the most interesting in battle. Those in the Deadliest Warrior series, where they pit a class called Pirate against a medieval knight. And according to what was said, and in the show by Michael Triplet, Pirate's Weapon Master, the pirate hit motto is get in, get out, hit 'em hard, hit 'em fast, take what you want and leave. And according to the Deadliest Warrior, wiki as well, the pirate, murderous killer of the high seas, versus the knight, sword-wielding slayer of the Middle Ages. Now, each warrior has a certain set of weapons. For the pirate, his weapon arsenal includes the cutlass sword, the boarding axe, the blunderbuss, a flintlock pistol, and grenado grenade. The pirate's stats are as follows. The year 1715. Height, current or something like that. I don't know what it means by C. 5'10", weight 170 pounds. Armor, none. Gear, 20 pounds. Loyalty, money. It basically English or French, which would be a privateer. Its symbol of the show, the Jolly Roger, or as we all know, the skull and crossbones. Activities of the pirate are basically piracy. Now, as for the knight, there is quite a big difference. Both combatants fight for a certain cause. The pirate fight, it's basically for their country in order to get wealth and respect from their native land. The knight, on the other hand, is loyal to his homeland, and as well as his king and queen, and fights to defend them in their honor. And according to David Coretti, Army veteran sword expert on the knight side, the knight is the toughest warrior of all time. They had honor, but they were killers. The stats are as follows. Gear, 1423. Height, 5'11". Weight, 180 pounds. Plated armor. The gear that they carried was 70 pounds. Their loyalty, the Kingdom of France. The symbol being the knight's helmet, or helm. Activities included eliminating French enemies. Their service, the Middle Ages. As for their weaponry, the knight had the broadsword, the halberd, or the crossbow, the morning star, which is the mace on a pole, and plated armor, of course. And during the fight, even though the pirate cheated, and he still won. And despite the fact that knight had armor, except for one spot at where the pirate could have easily hit him. I am talking about this right here. Since the knight's helmet had that little hinge face guard, basically all you have to do is just lift that sucker up and boom! Down goes the knight. Now on to number 9, and which is the Sicilian Mafia versus the Japanese Yakuza. Yeah, that's right, number 9. It's a gang and fight. Italians versus Japanese. Episode 5 of Season 1. And the Yakuza and Mafia were technically kind of the same, if you want to put it that way. And those of us who live in populated areas that are controlled by these forms of warriors, we basically know how things go down. Now if I can get the stupid wiki page to work. Excuse me a minute. According to Mafia weapons expert Joe Ferrante, to be in the Mafia, you must be 100% Italian. and your bloodlines have to relate straight back to the old country, to Italy, to Sicily, for you to even be a made man. The mafia, deadly enforcers on the mean streets of New York, versus the Yakuza, cruel warlords of Japan's underworld. Now, according to the stats, the typical mafia ranged in 1929. Height, 5'10". Weight, 170 pounds. Armor, none. Gear, her total weight up to 10 pounds. The symbol in the show, palm blood oath. Part of the initiation into the mafia, or Black Hand. Activities included organized crime, racketeering, counterfeiting, drug trafficking, extortion, fencing, illegal gambling, blackmailing, prostitution, loan sharking, murder, and other various crimes. Their service dates back to the 1920s to now, and the mafia members' weaponry of choice were the baseball bat, the sawed-off shotgun. Sorry, I cannot talk today. The Tommy gun, or the one kind of machine gun and with the rounded barrel. The Molotov cocktail, and uniquely enough, the ice pick. As sort of a silent but deadly kill. As for the Yakuza, on the other hand, and their weaponry and style was a lot more different. And according to David Kono, Yakuza descendant and historian, we live this, we breathe this, our kids grow up with this, and because of that, we don't give up, we're going to win. As for the Yakuza, their stats are as follows. O's and why on earth is this not giving me what I want? The year, 1947. Height, 5.5 feet. Weight, 150 pounds. Armor, none. Gear total, 10 pounds. Simple Yakuza dragon tattoo. Activities: organized crime, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, illegal gambling, prostitution, bribery, human trafficking, racketeering, murder, and various other crimes. Their service from 1947, which is after World War II, to current days. The origin started, of course, in Japan. And a little side note. Yakuza can be identified by their tattoos, which are outlined in public, and sometimes with removed fingers or fake fingers in their hands. And as for that finger thing, I think I know what that means. If they did something out of the disrespect of the Yakuza leader, or they had to cut off their fingers, or by the knuckle. And apparently if you didn't have any more knuckles on your hand, they'd go straight for your toes. And if the boss thought that you were way out of line, and they would hit off you right then and there. Now, as for the Yakuza's weaponry, they have the nunchucks, or nunchucks, the Walther P38 stem gun, ceramic grenade, and the sai. Now on to number 8, which is another gang fight. This time being Jesse James's gang versus Al Capone's gang. Oh, and by the way, Mafia won and against the Yakuza. Episode 12, Season 2. Jesse James had more compunction about cold-blooded murder than eating his breakfast, said Owie Dillon, champion gunslinger. And according to the Deadliest Warrior, Jesse James, the vicious outlaw whose bloody crime sprees made him the most infamous bank robber in America, against Al Capone, the ruthless gangster whose criminal empire bladed the streets of Depression-era Chicago. Now, as for the stats of Jesse James, his reign of terror, 1866 to 1876. Height, 5'8". Weight, 155 pounds. Gang members, 4 to 8. Crimes, bank robbery, train robbery, and murder. The symbol, Colt revolver. Activities for James were Confederate Army soldier, leader of the James Younger gang, and bank robbery and murder. His weaponry were, the arsenal was, the Bowie knife, the Colt revolvers, the Winchester rifle, and the pistol whip, which is basically Jesse James using his gun and this sort of a blunt instrument. Now, I know there's another Jesse James out there, and I know about him very well from the old Discovery Channel show, Monster Garage. It's now on to Al Capone's gang. We all know about Al Capone and what he's done. We also know about the infamous jail which he served time in Alcatraz. And Al Capone even said this himself: you can't get much farther with a kind word and a gun than with a kind word alone. Interesting words, Mr. Capone. Now, why on earth is this so slow? Al Capone was untouchable because he had everybody paid off. The police, the judges, the juries. There was no way they could get him. Quoted mafioso descendant Mayor Lansky II. And as for Capone's stats, his service was from 1922 to 1931. And height, 5'10", weight 250 pounds. Gang members, 10 to 20. Crimes included bootlegging and murder. His symbol, and main weapon, the Tommy gun. And his activities when he was still alive were as follows: the leader of Chicago outfit, bootlegging, smuggling liquor, and of course murder. Now as for Al Capone and his gang's weaponry, they had the stiletto knife, the Tommy gun, the pineapple bomb, and the infamous brass knuckles, which are now kind of on the ban of some items you can have. And against the fight between the James gang versus the Capone gang, Jesse James won in the end. Now, number 7. Actually, I take this back. There are 2 entries on the list. They're about as current as can be. And number 7 is just one of them. The KGB versus the CIA. the Russian Secret Service versus our own Secret Service here in the U.S. I found this episode incredibly interesting because I always found on the CIA's spy gear quite interesting in particular. Mostly because everything was hush-hush. And mostly, even though American Dad kind of exaggerated at some points about the gadgetry and weapons and the CIA could use, it still interests me. Now, this is a season 2 episode, and I forget which one it was. Here we are. Episode 18 in KGB versus CIA, season 2. Now, let's start with the Russians. The KGB, Communist Russia's secret police, whose reign of terror left nations marred with blood, versus the CIA, America's elite corps of espionage artists fighting an undercover war around the globe. According to KGB operator descendant Pavel Kasen's, sorry if I mispronounced your last name, KGB agents are as tough as they come. Not only are they physically prepared, but their mental training takes them far beyond the capabilities of a normal human being. Now their stats are as follows. The years active, 1954 to 1991. The average height, 5'10", average weight, 170 pounds. Their KGB's missions were as follows: assassination, espionage, and sabotage. The symbol or logo of the KGB are the sword and shield. As for their weaponry, just to name a few: the shoe knife, the camera gun, the Scorpion SMG 61, and the dead drop spike. Now, on to the CIA. And since I am going into Washington, D.C. next week for a vacation, and I actually plan on seeing the CIA museum. Now, according to Mike Baker, a former CIA agent, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was post-World War II, whether it was Afghanistan, the military is coming in behind us, special forces. You need to gather as much intelligence as possible all to support that force. First, now on to the stats. That's a long way on stats. That's the weaponry of the CIA, just to name a few as well, are as follows: the garrote, or basically anything you can choke out your enemy with. Piano wire, your scarf, or a long piece of fabric like a curtain. Basically anything that cuts off the circulation and around the neck area. The briefcase gun, the MAP 10, and the exploding cigar. Yeah, this weapon, it isn't just a comedy gag, it's also a lethal weapon. Now, the CIA's years active are as follows: 1947 to now. The average height, 5'11", average weight, 180 pounds. Their mission and is covert and paramilitary operations, and since 9/11, spying and oppression. And their symbol and logo is the eagle. Now, again, it's the KGB and the simulator. When they do team battles like 9, 8, and 8, and most of the battles on this list, there is a group of 5 per fighting class. As the CIA won in the end against the KGB. Technically, the KGB lost altogether during the Cold War against the CIA. Now on to number 6. This is another solitary fight between 2 warriors, or 2 types of warriors. The Shaolin Monk versus the Maori Warrior. Episode 7, Season 1. This is basically Chinese fighting styles versus the Maori New Zealand style. Oh, and of course, why on earth does this keep happening? The Shaolin Monk, the ultimate kung fu killing machine from China, against the Maori Warrior. They're a fierce and unforgiving slayer of the South Seas, namely New Zealand. And according to the kung fu master historian, Eric Chen, the monk's style was used to purge evil, no more and no less. Now we all know about the hardened discipline of the Shaolin monks. Their stats are in the show. Average height, 5'8". Average weight, 145 pounds. No armor. And their symbol and icon is the Chinese yin yang wheel. Their weapons include the MA piercers, the staff, which is a hardened and stick of bamboo, covered in hardened wax. The twin hook swords, and of course the whip chain. And as for the Maori Warrior of New Zealand, and it's a lot different. And according to Seamus Fitzgerald, Maori weapons historian, the Maori people ate, slept, and drank, killing and fighting. And they were incredibly powerful fighters in their area, mostly by intimidating their opponents before even going to battle with a dance called the Haka. As for the stats, average height 5'9", weight 108 pounds, no armor. The symbol, a fish hook. The Maori were known to make decorative fish hooks out of the bones of their enemies, some resembling their religious symbols. As for their weaponry, most of these weapons come from nature itself. There's the Maori club, which is a hand weapon made out of greenstone or jade. The taiaha, which is sort of like a spear slash staff, as well as a spear tipped with the stingers of a stingray, and a club that's armed literally to the teeth because the Maori use the teeth of sharks, giving it sort of like a saw-like look. Now on to number 5, episode 2 of Deadliest Warrior, Viking versus Samurai. On one side, we have the brutal, barbaric Vikings, which I'm descended from. Versus the well-disciplined and regal samurai. Now, both of these fighters are very iconic and well known for their histories. The Vikings were the first people of Europe to discover America, as well as other countries around the area. And the samurais fought kind of like ink bees, in a way. They lived to serve their daimyo, which is the big boss. Now let's go on to the Viking and stats and weaponry. Stated by Matt Nelson, Viking combat expert. A Viking can win that fight fair. He was there to win, to kill you and to take your possessions, bring them back, and feed his own family. Basically, the Vikings were pirates before it became a thing. Now the stats of the Viking were as follows. Average height, 6'1". Weight, 180 pounds. The gear that they carried, 65 pounds. Their armor, chainmail. The symbol, an iconic weapon, and the Vikings was the great axe. Next. Originating from Scandinavia, which is Sweden, Finland, and Norway, they reigned from the 700s to the 1000s, and raiding and pillaging wherever they went. And their weaponry was as follows: the great axe, the longsword, the spear, which they usually carried two at the same time, and of course a large wooden shield. That was probably made from a big door. Now, as for the samurai, their weaponry is a lot different. And among the pantheon of warriors, the samurai is truly the greatest. Says samurai descendant Tetsuro Shigematsu. And in order to become a samurai, you have to be born into a family of samurai. You can't just become one automatically. As for the stats, the average samurai was 5'3", 135 pounds, carrying gear that weighed a total of 65 pounds, and were protected by steel leather-plated armor and a kabuto helmet. The symbol of the samurai in the show was the Japanese script for samurai. It originated from feudal Japan. Activity is included fighting for their daimyo or warlord, and their service was from the 1500s to the 1700s. Their weaponry is as follows: the iconic katana sword, which, when they demonstrated into the show, was powerful enough to cleave 3 full-grown pigs is in half. And since they compare her pigs to human and flesh as a very well thought out example, well, the samurai could easily cut a person in half by just using the katana. Then there's the naginata, which is basically like a sword or slash staff. The yumi bow and arrow, which is actually kind of interesting because, according to what I found out, yumi is a Japanese word meaning snow, or is that yuki? I don't know. And of course, the kanabo club. Now, I said before in the top 25 mythical creatures list that oni were usually described as carrying the kanabo, which is a large wooden club, actually wood or iron, that's studded with either spikes or metal studs. And while they tested the kanabo against a beef bone, which it smashed through. But when they tested it against the Viking shield, it barely did anything. In the end, the samurai had defeated the Viking in the simulator. Now on to number 4, which is a tie. And like I said before, 2 of these entries are about as current as possible. And I might be getting some criticism for it. The first, they are the battles between Saddam Hussein versus Pol Pot and the IRA versus the Taliban. Basically, in the first battle is 2 of the most hated people in history and 2 terrorist groups. Now, we all know about Saddam Hussein, but as far as weaponry, they are as follows. The combat knife, the Browning semi-automatic pistol, the RPK light machine gun, the RGD A5 grenade, and as a method of torture, the chemical acid bath. As for Pol Pot, and his weaponry was the cane knife, or machete, the Takara of TT-33, the RPD light machine gun, the Chinese stick grenade, and as form of torture, electrocution. Now, as for the IRA and the Taliban episode, we all know by now who the Taliban are. Their religion is extreme as of the Muslim faith. Who basically fight anyone and they see as a threat to their religion or basically anyone who's not like them. The IRA are sort of like that, but it basically stands for this. It's the Irish Rebellion Army. Now, the IRA weaponry are as follows. The slingshot, yeah, that's a weapon. The LPO-50 flamethrower. The AR-15 Armalite. The nail bomb. The weaponry revolver and the HK G3 sniper rifle. As for the Taliban's weaponry, they have the bayonet, the RPG-7 rocket launcher, the AK-47 assault rifle, and the PMet and mine. Now, the winners of both episodes are as follows. In the battle between Saddam Hussein versus Pol Pot, Hussein won. The IRA versus the Taliban, IRA won. Now on to number 3, which is the Ming Warriors versus the Musketeers. The Ming Warriors' weaponry were the Dao sword, the 3-barreled pole gun, and the nest of bees, which is basically, how should I put this? A honeycomb-shaped bazooka that contained at least 100 rockets. Basically, this is the equivalent to a military-grade rocket launcher that can fire multiple rockets at the same time. Although the results vary depending on how it's used. The mechanical landmine, and they were protected by leather or armor. The musketeers had weaponry as follows: the rapier or sword and main-gouge knife, the wheel-lock pistol, the flintlock musket, the grenade, and we were protected by steel S armor. Now on to number 2, the Aztec Jaguar warrior versus the Zombie warrior. It's Mesoamerica versus Africa. And this is another tie, as the second episode, or number 2, is Scotland's William Wallace versus Africa's Shaka Zulu. Now, I found both of these episodes interesting, and the same way I found on the number 4 spot interesting. My brother, Isaiah, was adopted from Guatemala, which is around Mesoamerica. Their history has something incredibly interesting about them, such as human sacrifice with one of the weapons they used in the episode. The Aztec Jaguar's weaponry included, and pardon me if I can't pronounce the names right, the Tecpalo knife, which was the weapon mostly used in human sacrifice, where they used it to cut the heart out of someone while they were still alive. And the blade that are used in the Aztec Jaguar's weaponry are made of obsidian or volcanic glass. They also had the Maqualo sword club, which literally looks like a long club with obsidian blade and dotted around it. And they used this weapon and to demonstrate how efficient it is. Because, according to history, there are stories of these warriors using these weapons to decapitate horses that were used by the conquistadors. And it worked. Also, there's the Tlaquatli and Atlatl, or basically it's sort of like a spear and a spear thrower, as well as the Tomatlatl sling. Like in the biblical story of David and Goliath. And they were protected by quilted cotton armor that was soaked in agave, and which kind of made it pretty hard to hit. The Zande warriors, on the other hand, and the following weapons: the Makrat, like a knife, the Makrit, like a spear, which did more damage coming out than going in, because it was a multi-barbed spear. They had the Kapinga throwing knife, which definitely symbolizes masculinity. If you don't know what I mean, look it up yourself. It's spelled Kpinga. Or Book of the Deadliest Warrior Wiki. They have the Bodo and Pima, bow and arrow, and were mostly protected by a large wicker shield. Now, between the fight of the Aztec Jaguar versus the Zande Warrior, the Zande won, and mostly because of the Macriga. And by the way, by Aztec Jaguar, I don't mean the animal itself, but the warriors were so fierce, or they were called the Jaguars. Now on to William Wallace versus Shaka Zulu. Now, for those of us who haven't heard anything about the movie Braveheart or anything about world history, William Wallace led the Scottish to rebel against the British. His weaponry was the warhammer, the claymore, which was a 9-foot long sword. You had to use both hands to use. The ball and chain. I'm wrong with my nose. The Targe and Dirk, which was basically a shield that had a long metal spike on it, and he was protected mostly with chainmail armor. Shaka Zulu's weaponry were the Zulu axe, the Ikwa and Ishlagu spear and shield, the Ishwa club, which was basically a long strip of carved wood and with a huge ball at the end, and the spit of poison, which wasn't really an effective weapon. It was more of a cheap tactic. Basically, by chewing up this particular plant, and Shaka and his warriors used it to blind the opponent by spitting up this poison and then using ostrich feathers to kind of stab it into the enemy, temporarily blinding and disorienting them, only to come around with one of the aforementioned weapons. In that fight, William Wallace won, mostly due to the claymore. Hell, I'm not surprised. In the practice run, and they tested it out by setting 3 human skull replicates on pork loins to simulate 8 human heads and necks. The guy they had and practiced with the claymore took out all 3 with a single swing. Now, before we go on to number 1, I have to mention this one, otherwise it's going to bug me for all eternity. And it has to do with number 1. My honorable mention is the episode of Vlad the Impaler versus Sun Tzu. The father of modern warfare and the inspiration for Dracula. Oh, historical battle that is. Now, let's start with the father of modern warfare himself, Sun Tzu. But when he wrote the book Art of War, he actually used blood when he first wrote it. And Sun Tzu is the reason why we have come up with so many battle strategies over the years. That's still being used today. And his weapons back then were the Jian sword, the European crossbow, flaming arrows. He was protected with leather or lamellar armor, or a bronze helmet and shield. But his most interesting weapon was a long iron staff-like club called the Jula, or as it's known by the other name, the Iron Claw. And on one end of the staff is a huge metal ball, which is used to knock out the opponent. But on the end that was used that most was a clawed hand that was mostly used for either raking in the opponent's face is off, tearing apart shield, and basically grabbing hold of an enemy on horseback and dragging him off. I find this weapon incredibly interesting, almost as interesting as the Kanabo. Vlad and the Impaler's weaponry is the Q-edged sword, or the halberd, the steel crossbow, the hand cannon, which actually has two functions. One, it can be used as a firearm, and two, because of the metal spike that has for easy wielding, it can be used as a blunt instrument. And he was protected with plated mail armor and a shield. Now, as we all know about Vlad the Impaler, he was among the most infamous rulers of history, apart from Ivan the Terrible and Caligula, mostly because of his methods. And sold off to the Turks as a young boy, and he got his revenge by training under them, only to turn his back on them and rule Romania. And one of the methods that proved that he was ruthless was when two Turkish emissaries came to him. He told them to remove their turbans. They refused, and he had them sent back with the turbans, I'm kidding you not, nailed to their heads as a sign and saying, you want to follow my rules? I don't have to follow yours. And among the various ways is Vlad had Tepes killed on his opponents in war. There were two mentionable killing methods. One was decapitation with the killage, and two was the infamous impaling, which is as gruesome and grisly as one can imagine. Now, instead of impaling someone through the abdomen and just killing them off right there, no. Vlad took it one step further. Now, how am I going to explain in this method and of death? Basically, what Vlad and his soldiers did to their enemies with these stakes was ram them up their rear, ram them up the opponent's rears, or killing them by having the victim slide slowly down, pushing the tip of the stake further up until basically it broke through. And Vlad the Impaler, of course, is the godfather of vampires, or particularly the inspiration behind the most infamous vampire, or Count Dracula. Mostly due to his war tactics. Now, of course, in the fight between Vlad the Impaler and Sun Tzu, take a wild guess who won. Vlad the Impaler. And I thought, in a way, he killed Sun Tzu. Interesting. Before he killed him, he used the killage to basically, literally, unhand and unarm Sun Tzu. And instead of just decapitating him right then and there, he used the stake and impalement method. Now, why did I put Sun Tzu versus Vlad the Impaler as an honorable mention? Well, like I said, it has to do with number 1, which is my all-time favorite episode out of the series, as well as the series finale. And sadly, vampires versus zombies. This one's interesting because it featured the guy responsible for the 30 Days of Night movies and Max Brooks, who is probably the best known person to turn to when it comes to zombies, as well as the author of World War Z. Now, this one is different because they went in with a lot of research on the vampires versus zombies. This episode, because they're taking two fictional, or supposedly fictional, types of warriors. They have the classical zombies going up against the classical vampires against the George A. Romero zombies. So no, there is not going to be any Twilight vampires. Actually, I want to take this moment to say I do not count any vampire in the Twilight series is an actual vampire. Mostly because they break that one rule of all vampires. Meaning, vampires are supposed to burn to death when in the sun, not sparkle like diamonds. Now, each combatant only had 2 weapons, despite their numerous traits. For the vampire, its weapons are the vampire claws and the vampire fangs. Now, according to Steve Niles, the screenwriter of 30 Days of Night, we're talking about a super killing machine, a thinking apex predator. And he's right, a vampire is an apex predator. And they made a ton of comparisons of the vampires. According to Scott Bowen, the author of the Vampire Survival Guide, blood to a vampire is like super fuel. That's what gives the vampire that superpower. Now, when they tested out the vampires versus zombies, first off, they had to go with a lot of different statistics for the vampires. According into the research, vampires can run 6 times faster than an Olympic athlete, are 6 times stronger than the most powerful strongmen, meaning they're 10 times stronger than a normal person. They have superhuman senses such as smell, hearing, intelligence, and work in packs, similar to wolves, that can survive mutilations as long as they don't bleed out, and don't have their heart or damaged or removed, or are decapitated or suffering from brain damage. Now, the typical way of destroying a vampire is a wooden stake. Basically, take out the heart or the head. And while the vampire is undead, it still has emotions, such as fear, anger, sadness, and vengeance. They do feel pain, but their superhuman strength and powerful heart makes them resistant. And they can turn other people into vampires who they would mentally control as a head vampire. Here. Now, the only other serious weakness for the vampires, of course, sunlight. And since the vampire can normally live forever, or if not murdered by or affected by magic, they have survived him through many plagues of the past, so it is believed that they are naturally resistant to disease. Though there's a debate over they would be affected by the abnormal zombie virus, which is accountable in the movie or episode. Now, as for the vampire claws, I love how they tested and now that theory. In 30 Days of Night, if the vampires could easily maul someone to death in about 1 to 5 seconds. And the vampires on the show had razor-sharp claws on the tips of each finger. Each claw was as strong as steel and swung with the vampire's superhuman strength. And the test, the vampire's ability to quickly deliver a killing strike to the zombie's brain with his claws, is they constructed a pneumatic vampire arm rigged to strike a zombie model skull with its claws to get the right amount of force for the strike. They had professional strongman Clay Edgen, and to give them a measurement of what kind of force a human can deal with one blow against a tech scan pressure mat. The readings of Clay's punch were then multiplied by 6 to get a striking force of the vampire's claw, which was then fed into the arm, and when the hand struck the zombie head with over 8,000 pounds of pressure, which is actually 4 tons of force. It pierced through the zombie's brain in barely a second. And another point they came across is the vampire's speed and strength are determined by their rich blood and combined with a rapidly beating heart. If they lose blood, their strength and speed will diminish. No. There's one battle. Oh yeah, the vampire fangs. Now, as we're all aware, the vampire's teeth are razor sharp, but instead of those typical canine teeth, just pointing out, Well, the vampire may have had an entire mouthful of teeth, much like a shark. And could not hinge its jaws to increase the size of the bite. A good example would be Dracula from Van Helsing. In order to gauge the vampire's bite force, the Deadliest Warrior crew measured the bite of the strongest jaws in nature at alligators. They then fed the numbers from the alligator's bite into a pneumatic jaw, but switched the zombie's teeth for a set of vampire fangs, and then modifying it to be able to open wider. When used in a ballistics gel zombie skull, the vampire fangs were able to take a big piece of the zombie's brain in just 2 bites, with an overall time of about 5 seconds. Now that is interesting. Took like 5 seconds to bite through a zombie's skull. But it only took like 1 second to knock out a zombie with just its claws. Now there's one other thing I went and to come across. Oh yeah. Now for this simulated battle, they went above and beyond the norm. Before they even did anything, you wanted to see how many zombies a vampire can take out before they completely encircle it. Now, after the practice run, they came up with a number. A single vampire can take out 63 zombies. These is a matter of time. In the simulated battle, they used 3 vampires for an army of 189 zombies. Now, as for the zombies, we're all aware of these undead and flesh-eating monsters. According to Max Brooks, author of World War Z, essentially a zombie acts exactly like a virus, which has no other purpose than to the complete consumption and destruction of the entire human race. And they compare the zombie virus to swine flu and how fast it can spread. According to Matt Mock, the founder of the Zombie Research Society, a zombie feels no fear. It never gets discouraged. It will never stop. Now, the purpose of the zombie is to spread the zombie virus and feed on humanity. But of course, a zombie will not feed on the brain, and as it wants to create more zombies. And by the Romero zombies, I officially refer to the zombies that are portrayed in George A. Romero's films like Night of the Living Dead. And of course, his zombies' weapons are its hands and bite. Now let's begin with the zombie bite. At which, of course, we all know if a zombie bites you, you become a zombie. Normally a bite from a human mouth would not be a terribly effective weapon. but the zombie bite is made much more deadly for two reasons. The first is, along with all its other muscles, the limits on the zombie's jaw muscles have been turned off or removed, allowing it to use 100% of their strength for just biting, or in biting in general. This gives the zombie a biting force roughly equivalent to a trained Rottweiler, or 3 times the bite of a normal person. The second is that the zombie bite is the primary means of transmitting the virus from zombie to victim. By biting into its victim, a zombie allows its infected blood and saliva to enter the zombie wound, assuring that even if they survive the attack, the virus has already bested them. Even if the victim is killed by the zombie, it's possible for the virus to reanimate the corpse. Now, when they tested out the zombie bite, before they tested out the vampires, the zombie bite ruptured the blood vessels in the vampire throat, causing it to bleed out in about 2 minutes and 22 seconds. As the vampire or human loses blood, they become slower, weaker, and fatigued from blood loss. Also, bleeding would increase by anything that might increase heart rate, like fighting or running. And of course, according to the Deadliest Warrior website, zombies can still bite after being decapitated. Since their bodies were dead anyway, the only way to kill a zombie is to directly damage the brain, and will bite curious humans who try to pick up the head. This has happened in films like Return of the Living Dead 2. Now, as for the zombie hands, and since a zombie is undead, and it can range from rotting flesh to down to pure skeleton. And I think I have something on it. Yeah. As a horde of zombies closes in on its victim, they are able to use their hands to pin down and painfully disembowel them as they feast. As with its bite, the zombie's hands make use of supernatural strength, letting it tear at flesh and bone with ease. The strength of a zombie would be similar to a heavyweight lifter due to being unable to feel pain in its hands and being extremely aggressive. Some zombies have claws either from enlarging of the nails, similar to vampire claws minus for women speed and then not being as strong, or wearing down on their hands. As their flesh falls off, the bones of a zombie are exposed and chiseled down by wear. This makes the hands harder and sharper than before. Some zombie claws can transfer the zombie virus by lacerating their victims. Ooh. The main weakness of the zombie hands, however, is that is most effective when used by an entire horde of zombies. A single zombie won't be able to use them as effectively without a couple of other zombies to hold down the victim, especially if that victim is as strong as a vampire. Now, how do they simulate this? That's beforehand. To see how quickly and effectively the zombie hand could kill a vampire by removing the heart, a ballistics gel torso was laid on its back on a table for 3 professional strongmen to tear at. However, as zombie expert Max Brooks pointed out, zombies would not possess the knowledge needed to target a specific organ in the victim's body, and would instead view the victim's whole body as one and big, humongous lunch. To compensate for this, the strong men were blindfolded so that they couldn't see where the torso's heart was, in reference to where their hands were digging at. In this condition, the strong men were able to tear open the chest in 20 to 30 seconds and remove its heart in about 58. This is only with 3 zombies. In a horde that's larger, the time to kill will be cut down. For instance, 9 zombies would kill a vampire in about 19 seconds. Now, with that in mind, in the simulated battle between the vampires versus zombies, one of the best horror fights I've ever seen. It's basically every vampire movie versus every zombie movie colliding against one another. In the end, it's sort of a hit and miss on who exactly won. As we see in the end of the fight, the vampire, the last vampire, manages to kill off the final zombie, declaring it the winner. But at the end of the show, the zombie virus has taken an effect on the vampire, turning into a zombie vampire. Here, with the end, and leaving a cliffhanger that says to be continued. If they didn't and do this, I would love to see what would happen and afterwards. Well, this is it for my top 10 Deadliest Warrior episodes. I hope you all enjoyed it, and you can actually catch these episodes on YouTube. They're on SpikeTV.com. If I left out anything in particular about each warrior, let me know in the comment section. And stay tuned tomorrow, or next time, when I take on one form of mythology in general. Next time, I'll be going over the creatures of Japanese mythology. So be prepared for me possibly mispronouncing every name and word. And just to give you a quick heads up, I will not be mentioning the Oni. I might mention the Slipmouth woman, but I will not mention the Kappa or the yokai, because, well, there are so many different kinds of yokai, both in the original Japanese mythology and, of course, anime. So this is Demon09 and saying, see ya.